Hi, my name is Peter, and I'm a parishioner at Mary, Queen of the Apostles Parish in Salem, Massachusetts. This is my weekly reflection on the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. In Sunday's Gospel, we continue again with reading from the 6th chapter of the Gospel of John. Before we talk about this week's Gospel, let me remind you of some of the background. So 2 weeks ago, we read about the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. Jesus went from the mountain where he fed thousands to the town of Capernaum, where the next day he was teaching at the synagogue. The crowd was confused when, asking Jesus for a sign like the manna from heaven, Jesus says, "I'm the bread of life. Come to me, believe in me." Well, thanks to Bishop Barron for explaining something last week about the multiplication of the loaves and fishes story. It describes the Mass. So what happens? A crowd gathers, they hear the words of Jesus, some bread is given to the disciples, Jesus gives thanks and distributes the blessed bread to the crowd. Also at the Mass, we offer what we have at the offertory, kind of like the little boy who brings his barley loaves and fish. Now, I always wondered about this little detail of the little boy. Why is he in the story? Bishop Barron explains that we're like this little boy. Since we are at the Mass, the purpose of the offertory is to collect and offer what little each of us has. But something struck me from today's gospel, which are the words from Jesus at the very end of today's reading. He says, "The bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world." This struck me because maybe Jesus was comparing himself to that little boy on the mountain the day before. Maybe the people in the crowd knew that boy. Maybe that boy was still in the crowd at the synagogue. That little boy gave a few loaves of bread. And then Jesus says, "The bread I will give is my flesh for the life of the world." The bread that Jesus gives is himself. At the Last Supper and on the cross, and at every Mass, Jesus also gives what little he has, his entire self. His glorified body, blood, soul, and divinity are the bread that Jesus gives on Calvary, where it was broken and distributed to the crowd of all humanity. It's like every Mass ever performed is just one group among the many groups of people gathered with all of heaven on Calvary. To each group, Jesus distributes his body in an eternal, never-ending multiplication of the bread that he gave for the life of the world on the cross. So when you worship at Mass this Sunday, whether in person or virtually, whether receiving communion or not, or performing a spiritual communion, consider what Jesus is bringing to the Mass. His body and blood from the cross is distributed to your group in a crowd gathered from heaven as well in all Masses throughout all time. May God bless you, and I'll see you next week.